Привіт. I'm Chuck Linik, a Ukrainian-American who was baptized with the name Yaroslav, which is also the name that I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism. I used to be a teacher, and I would dress in garb for the different periods. Once I retired, I decided I'm going to continue doing what I do, only this time I'll use video. And I've been putting together a series of videos on Slavic folklore and mythology because I wanted to make it more accessible, and I was staring at a pile of notebooks that high on all this Slavic research I'd done, and I thought I would share that on my YouTube channel, which would be really nice if you subscribe to, by the way, and make this more available to people in the society in case they wanted to look at Eastern European stuff. And then I realized I had to do the history part as well as the mythology and folklore. So what I've been doing of late is covering the different rulers of Kyivan Rus. And now I get to deal with my namesake, Yaroslav. Only is Yaroslav Mudry or Yaroslav the Wise. Yaroslav Volodymyrovich, or Yaroslav Mudry, or Yaroslav the Wise. He was born in 978 and would become Grand Prince of Kyiv from 1019 until 1054. He was one of a dozen sons of Grand Prince Volodymyr the Great and possibly Princess Rogneda of Polotsk. His brothers, well, he had one brother by the same mother, Mstislav of Chernihiv, but his half-brothers are better known. Sviatopolk I, called the Accursed, whom he'll go to war against, and Saints Boris and Kyiv. In his youth, Yaroslav was sent by Volodymyr to govern the lands of Rostov. That was around 988, and he was actually pretty young at the time, before he ended up being transferred to Veliki Novgorod, or Novgorod the Great, in 1010. And that befitted a senior heir to the throne. While living there, Novgorod became his main power base, and he united the principalities for a time. His relationship with his dad wasn't very good at all. It was a pretty strained relationship. It didn't get better when the news came out that Volodymyr had bequeathed the throne of Kyiv to his younger son Boris. So that caused a little bit of tension. And around this time, that's around like 1014, Sviatopolk rebelled against his dad, and so did Yaroslav. And Yaroslav refused to pay the yearly tribute of 2,000 hryvnia to Kyiv. And Volodymyr puts down Sviatopolk's rebellion, locks him up for a little bit, and now he's preparing to go to war against Yaroslav, and he's building or repairing bridges and repairing roads because he wants to get there quick, and he dies while he's preparing the expedition. During the next 4 years, Yaroslav's going to wage a complicated and bloody war for Kyiv against his half-brother Sviatopolk I of Kyiv. Yaroslav defeats Sviatopolk and his Pechenik allies in the first battle in 1015, and Sviatopolk runs away to Poland, where his in-laws are. And Yaroslav becomes Grand Prince for a very short time. During the course of the struggle, several other brothers, Boris, Kyiv, and Sviatoslav, they get brutally murdered. The primary chronicle accuses Sviatopolk of planning the murders. Well, in 1018, Sviatopolk shows up with his father-in-law, Boleslaw the Brave of Poland, who's going to be the future king of Poland, and a fairly big army, and they're going to defeat Yaroslav's army at the Bukh River, basically because the description is they're separated by the river and the two armies are taunting each other, and finally, you know, Yaroslav flips out and ends up basically, trying to attack, and it wasn't a good move on his part. And so when his army, which was largely people from Novgorod, gets routed, he doesn't run away to Kyiv and try to hold the city. He runs up to Novgorod, and he's thinking of going overseas and recruiting some Varangians, but people in Novgorod basically get on his case and say, no, 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 no. You're going to fight, and we're going to help you. Let's go get these guys now. And so when he ends up defeating Svyatopolk at the Alta River in 1019, and Svyatopolk, by the way, tries to run away, and he gets killed later, one of the first actions that Yaroslav is going to do is he's going to confer, as he's Grand Prince now, he's going to confer all sorts of freedoms and privileges to the people of Novgorod, because, hey, they had his back. But that's going to end up ultimately laying the foundation for Novgorod getting rid of princes and establishing the Novgorod Republic. And the thing is, the people in Novgorod really respected Yaroslav far more than they did other Kyivan princes. So the princely residence in their city, which was next to the marketplace and where the Vish, the People's Assembly, was held, that was named Yaroslav's court, in honor of him. That same year that Yaroslav became Grand Prince, he married Ingigerd, Olaf's daughter, the daughter of King Olaf of Sweden. Nestor the chronicler and some other Russian historians, and when you also look in the primary chronicle, Yaroslav is presented as a model of virtue, and he is styled the Wise. All right, then there's the less appealing side of his personality. He defeated a cousin, Birakislav, who was in charge of Polotsk, and basically slapped him around and got his loyalty that way. And he imprisoned his youngest brother, Sudislav, essentially for life. In response, another brother, Mstislav of Chernihiv, he rushes to Kyiv, and he and Yaroslav slug it out, and Yaroslav gets defeated. And what Yaroslav ends up doing is he ends up saying, okay, you get this territory that's on the left bank of the Dnipro, or Dnieper, if you look at the maps that are in English. A left bank basically means east and south, all right? You'll be hearing some of that actually with the war going on in Ukraine as far as left bank, right bank. Yaroslav basically gets the right bank, and his control extends up to Novgorod and essentially the Baltic. Okay, and this arrangement works out. And as a matter of fact, they would team up, and when Mstislav was having some problems, Yaroslav's forces showed up like, okay, fine. And Mstislav expanded his territory. And Mstislav turned around and helped Yaroslav take back some towns that Boleslav Poland had taken. Like, okay, now these are mine. And ultimately, what's going to end up happening is when Mstislav dies in 1036, now Yaroslav gets the stuff on the right bank and the stuff on the left bank. And Kyivan Rus is that much larger. From the primary chronicle, 1037. While Yaroslav was still at Novgorod, news came to him that the Pechenegs were besieging Kyiv. He then collected a large army of Varangians and Slavs returned to Kyiv and entered his city. The Pechenegs were innumerable. Yaroslav made a sally from the city and marshaled his forces, placing the Varangians in the center, the men of Kyiv on the right flank, and the men of Novgorod on the left. When they had taken position before the city, the Pechenegs advanced, and they met on the spot where the Metropolitan Church of St. Sophia now stands. At that time, as a matter of fact, there were fields outside. The combat was fierce, but toward evening, Yaroslav with difficulty won the upper hand. The Pechenegs fled in various directions, but as they did not know in what quarter to flee, many were drowned in streams, while the remnant of them disappeared from that day to this. To commemorate his victory, he initiated construction of the St. Sophia Cathedral. He also built more formidable fortifications. Volodymyr's city was surrounded by ramparts 50 feet high and 30 to 40 feet thick, and they were topped with whitewashed log walls and 4 gates, some of them of stone and brick. Those are marked in red. Yaroslav's city, which I marked in blue, built after the Pecheneg attacks, was 7 times larger than Volodymyr's city and adjoined it on the south. The fortifications comprised of 50-foot tall ramparts, or about 7 sashen if you want to use Rus measurements, 80 to 100 feet thick, or about 11 to 14 sashen, topped with log walls, and the walls stretched for over 2 miles, or over 3 versts. 4 stone or brick gates led into Yaroslav's city, the most famous being the Great or Golden Gate. The Golden Gate of Kyiv, or you want to say it in Ukrainian, it's Zolote Vorota, was the main gate in the 11th century fortifications of Kyiv, the capital of Kyivan Rus. It was named in imitation of the Golden Gate in Constantinople. The gate's passageway was about 40 feet high and 20 feet wide. For almost half a millennium, it served as the city's triumphal arch, a prominent symbol of Kyiv. To defend his state from the attacks of nomadic tribes, Yaroslav added to the Zmei Valley, or the Snake Ramparts, or the Dragon Ramparts, which stretched between 500 to over 600 miles. And that was ditches and earthen ramparts topped with wooden walls, at times 20 feet high, 80 feet thick, and they were closely linked to fortresses built along the rivers. To strengthen his power and provide order in social and legal relations in his realm, Yaroslav arranged for the compilation of a book of laws called Pravda Yaroslava, or Yaroslav's Justice. That was the oldest part of the Ruskaya Pravda, which is why when you see some of the period illustrations, he's holding a book. That's what it is. In illustrations and in statues and monuments, you will also see him holding a cathedral. That's because he built St. Sophia Cathedral and a whole bunch of other churches. As a matter of fact, I think there were like 400 in Kyiv alone, and this was to basically make Kyiv like the rival, an architectural rival of Constantinople. Royalty marries off their kids to make connections, and Yaroslav is no different. There's a fresco in St. Sophia Cathedral in Kyiv, and this part of it represents the daughters of Yaroslav. Anna, she's Yaroslav's favorite. She's the youngest, and she'll get married off to Henry I of France. By the way, apparently she was the only one capable of actually signing her name on the contract. And she also served as regent until their son got old enough. All right, and the other daughters are Anastasia. She got married off to Andrew I of Hungary. There was Elizabeth, got married to Harold III, or Harold Hadradi. He won her hand when he was in exile. And then there's Agatha, who's going to be the wife of Edward the Exile. As to the boys, Yaroslav had one son from his first marriage, and that would be Volodymyr, who got placed in charge of Novgorod, and 6 sons from his second marriage. And Yaroslav really knows the danger of brothers fighting for the throne, so he really drives it home to them of, no, you need to get along with each other. As a European power, Kyivan Rus reached its zenith under his rule. This is from the Primary Chronicle 6562 or 1054. Yaroslav, Grand Prince of Rus, passed away. While he was yet alive, he admonished his sons with these words: "My sons, I am about to quit this world. Love one another, since ye are brothers by one father and mother. If ye abide in amity with one another, God will dwell among you, and will subject your enemies to you, and ye will live in peace. But if ye dwell in envy and dissension, quarreling with one another, then ye will perish yourselves, and bring to ruin the land of your ancestors, which they won at the price of great effort. Wherefore remain rather at peace, brother heeding brother." Yaroslav passed away in 1054 at the age of 76. After his death, his body was placed in a marble sarcophagus within St. Sophia's Cathedral. His remains were later lost or stolen, but his marble sarcophagus has been preserved. From the Primary Chronicle 6562 or 1054. Izyaslav then took up his abode in Kyiv, with Sviatoslav in Chernihiv, Vsevolod at Pereyaslavl, Ihor at Vladimir, and Vyacheslav at Smolensk. So the idea is, or that Yaroslav had, was the different principalities had different seniority. And so the principalities were assigned to his various sons. And the idea would be, if one died, the different princes, the brothers, would then shift to another principality. And I guess the logic would be they're going to be more loyal to, they're going to think of Kyiv or Kyivan Rus as one entity. What ends up happening, though, is, Kyiv ends up less united than before. And we're going to see that play out when I cover the next part of the history part of Tales of the Borderland and take a look at what the sons of Yaroslav end up doing. I hope you stick with me. I hope you subscribe to the channel. Do pobачення.